It's the 2022 World Cup. It's South Korea's players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor, and today we are looking at South Korea's squad for the 2022
Short
World Cup.
version, please. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the player-by-player discussion, and we move on to a discussion of the squad. By the way, Connor, you have a Korean shirt, he said enviously.
I do have a Korean shirt, and surely having lived in Korea for as long as you did, you have one too.
I think I've outgrown it. I used to have one. I can't remember where it is, and now I'm going with this hokey red and white T-shirt theme. How am I doing?
It's a poor substitute. I think you have a bit of time before the World Cup to sort that out. Come on, Kevin.
Okay, I'll get on it, Connor. I'm sorry. All right. Well, we'll review some of the notes that we talked at the top of the podcast. So some of them we kind of detailed above, and some of them we'll detail here now that we've been through the player-by-player section. Do you want to lead us through?
Yeah, the first note we had was that they were once again second behind Iran.
That's right, and we won't detail that here. So what was the next one?
Next one was their current form, and we talked about how it's kind of hard to tell, largely because their last major tournament was in 2019.
Yeah, however, a good thing in their friendlies, even though they have all been at home, and so maybe don't reveal much about their general strength, is that they have been scoring in those friendlies. They got one goal against Brazil, but more than one goal against Chile, Paraguay, and Egypt. None of those particularly easy defenses. So that's positive, hey?
Yeah, that's definitely a good sign, and kind of the timing is good leading into the World Cup.
Yeah, because they'll be worried about that. But that does constitute our next general point is a scoring. Oh, that was supposed to be you introducing it. Well, do you want to detail it then?
Yeah, so just talking about that scoring problem, I mean, Son Heung-min is a bit of a savior in this regard, but even with him, they actually do struggle. In the Asian Cup, they only scored once against kind of weak opposition, being once each against Philippines and Kyrgyzstan. And then also again struggle with Bahrain. So it is encouraging, as you mentioned, that they've scored in some of their friendlies, including 4 against Egypt, who have a solid defense. But it is a problem they need to solve. And with their current players, do you think they've had some of the players we've talked about?
I don't know, Connor. It's kind of been an ongoing problem for Korea ever since ever. They're just not kind of ferocious scorers. So actually, we'll see that some of the scorers have decent percentages, but I think a lot of those have been earned against weaker teams, as we saw with Chinook there. I think it'll be a problem for them.
Yeah, and maybe a bit difficult when teams know that Son Heung-min is the main threat. Everyone's aware of him. I mean, he's still hard to stop. The people in the Premier League, but that's where that secondary scoring can really help you out when you can't just focus on one guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably their main concern there. Less concern is the defense. It's a pretty solid defense. Yeah, they've always been pretty good defensively, holding their own. And Kim Min-jae is back. He was injured for the last World Cup. And left back Kim Jin-soo, I don't think we mentioned it in the player-by-player podcast, but he was also injured during the last World Cup. So they'll definitely be happy to have those two back.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about their players. And first we look at club affiliations. Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, so the majority of players you mentioned play in South Korea, which has its own league and one of the better leagues in Asia for sure. They have several players though who do play in Germany or in Europe. Many of them in Germany, which seems to be a bit of a pipeline for Korean players. Even Son Heung-min getting his start that way. And then among those clubs, there are a couple that stand out. Napoli for Kim Min-jae, Tottenham, of course. So the clubs in Europe tend to be kind of middling clubs, Bundesliga teams, a couple with Olympiacos. But then, like we said, a couple clubs that stand out. And I think it should be mentioned that there are a couple players that we mentioned who play in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, which could be some slight advantage if those players are selected.
Yeah, I mean, as well as South Korea playing in the Asian region, so they've had qualification games in those countries that will hopefully be a bit of an advantage. That is a bit of a odd association they have with Germany. I remember when I lived there, I don't know if this is the case now, but I remember a few of the boys telling me that the boys studied German in maybe junior high or high school. And I was always curious why that was. Also, their Cha Bum-gun is probably their first international player, and he also played in Germany. So they have this kind of ongoing association with Germany.
Yeah, well, it's been good. It's given some kind of higher profile and great experience for some of the players, and it's also been kind of a pipeline to some other leagues. Although the German league is strong in and of itself.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that, and let's move on to the next one. That's the little stats thing that I've been compiling, and the first stat we look at is how many players are kind of on the slate for South Korea. So we're generally looking at players who have been called up since 2021. Actually, it says 2020. Connor, we've been doing this podcast for quite a few teams now, and I think it was only in the last podcast that I noticed it was 2021. It should be 2021, not 2020.
Yeah.
Anyway, Korea has 53 players kind of on the slate. Total candidates. That is a bit higher than average. The average is about 50. So not juggling as many players as some teams, especially the CONCACAF teams. But we did go through a lot of players here. Any comments?
No, not really. I mean, they've also played probably a few more games, playing 20 games since 2021. That's a few more than some other countries. So maybe a couple more opportunities at the margins to bring some more players in.
Yeah. Well, we do see something interesting in the next two stats. And one, sorry, I didn't write 53 on the graphic there. We have 40 players under consideration. So those would be the definite, likely, and possible players. 40 is well above average. The average is 33. However, the definite and likely is much lower, or a little bit lower than average, 20. So basically what we have here is 20 starters, so a stable team in terms of starters, the number of starters who play. And on the other hand, a lot of players on the periphery. And we did see quite a few players who were called up to the squad but didn't really see any action. They were just maybe coming in as subs or even just on the bench. Did you notice that?
Yeah, and some players who just had a handful of appearances in those 20 games. We did have a lot in the likely category, and I think it's an interesting point you made that their starters are kind of core is pretty much intact, but it's kind of filling out the squad where they've used a bit more experimentation. So we'll see whether it's a matter of trying to find kind of the right players, or we saw a couple young players kind of come in for just a game or two and then leave. Kind of will remain to be seen if any of those players are given the opportunity to join the World Cup squad.
Yeah, I mean, kind of long enough to make them possible candidates, but not necessarily long or consistent enough to make them seem like they really are going to make the squad. The long and short of it is, among those 40 players, roughly speaking, only 6 of them are going to make the final squad. Mm-hmm. There will be kind of injuries and maybe players in form changing it, but roughly speaking, only about 6 of the possible players we talked about will make the squad. Okay, well, the other stats are the average age 27.6. That's a bit higher, actually, a bit higher. I'm actually finding a lot of teams in this World Cup is higher. The average now is 26.8. I think that's higher than previous cups.
Yeah, I wouldn't know offhand. I think one thing I've noticed is Korea is a number of players at 25, 26 who have just a handful of caps. So perhaps maybe with the East Asian Cup and the U23 squad, they're getting kind of their start a little bit later. And I'm not sure about some of the other teams, but in Korea's case, that may boost the average age a little bit, though there are exceptions, of course.
Yeah, well, I can detail it a little bit more out of the what did I say? 40 definite, likely, or possible. 13 of them are 30 years old or older, and then none of them are below 23. Wow, that's a bit surprising. We did see a couple of players who were below 20, but they didn't make it to the possible level or above. Anyway, with age comes experience, and the average number of caps for Korea is 27.9, and the average among all the teams there is 29.4. So actually, despite the older players, despite the older than average players, they have fewer caps than average. What do you make of that?
Well, it might be the point I made earlier that some of these players are just taking a little bit longer to get their first start or making their first appearance at a little bit of an older age than perhaps they are at some other teams.
Yeah, no, good point. That bore out in the stats. Total goals, 123 among the players they have. We said there are 31 players, but we will kind of clarify this with a stat. Total goals per player won't mean much in itself, 11.6%, but the average is 13.6%, and Korea is one of the lowest there, along with Japan and Australia, a very low-scoring team. And that kind of supports the problem scoring thesis that we've been developing here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's look at some of the players and issues to watch, and maybe if you want to introduce them, and I'll comment on them if necessary.
Sure. So in defense, we're looking at either Hong Chul or Kim Jin-soo for left defense.
Yeah, that position was not well decided, but again, we may be talking about a rotation here, which I think we're seeing more in the cup. It could be that they're rotating, but I think we nominated Kim Jin-soo as a bit more likely.
Yeah, and then at right back, we talked about this earlier, but the position seems a bit unsettled.
Yeah, no lack of candidates there, but we haven't seen one player kind of consistently starting in that position. Yeah, let's move on to the midfield.
So one is the loss of Gi Sung-young, who's one of their kind of higher profile players recently.
Yeah, they have lost a few players since 2019 and 18, and we'll review those. But do you consider that a big loss, Connor?
I think it was in a sense. I mean, I would say he's one of their kind of more high profile and more kind of important players over the last little while. But like you said, it doesn't seem to have hurt them that much. And he retired a few years ago, so they seem to have kind of moved on and have found other players to fill in his position.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the players replacing him are covering it quite well. We did see a lot of. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just introduce the next issue.
All right.
Which is kind of what the rotation of attacking midfielders means.
Yeah, we've seen that Son Heung-min and Hwang Hee-chan and the other player whose name eludes me at the moment, a lot of rotation, switching positions. So I wonder if that's kind of a tactical variation, maybe matching those players up to the team they're playing, or whether they're still searching for a formula that's going to lead to goals.
Yeah, and kind of related, the right attacking midfielder position seems unsettled at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, generally it seems like Son Heung-min on the left, and even though they do move around, we've seen a couple of players in the right attacking midfielder position, so that one seems a bit more undecided. It's probably Hwang Hee-chan, but they have tried a number of players out in that position. All right, let's move on to the attack.
Well, we identified a lack of goals as a problem earlier. So what do you think? Are Hwang Wee-jo and Jo Gyu-sung the answer for goals?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm not sure these players will be the answer, but it is encouraging that in the friendlies they scored quite a few goals, and those goals came. I think Son Heung-min maybe got one in each of the games. I mean, he was a regular. These two didn't score as much as you would hope a forward would, but on the other hand, they did get goals from kind of various players on the field, which was a bit positive. That was good.
Yeah, including a couple defenders.
Yeah, I mean Kim Min-jae and they move up for corners and stuff. We saw in the play-by-play of them getting a few goals, probably heading in corners. So hopefully they can add to their goal count that way. All right, well, time to move on to new players. And actually, to kind of illustrate a point earlier, I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, it just goes on forever, 15, 16, 17, 16 or 17 new players, all in the possible category, kind of illustrating what we said, that they've been bringing in a lot of young players, but not necessarily, them not necessarily making the squad. I mean, more so than other teams, because of course every team does that. So we're just going to focus on players that did make the squad here. In other words, definite candidates or likely candidates. And we have 2 definite and 4 likely. So in the attacking midfield, we have Kwon Chang-hoon, usually plays on the right there. And he's not young, actually. He's 28 years old, but hasn't played in a tournament. So we considered him a new player. Is that fair, Connor?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Also a definite candidate, the central midfielder, but slightly more attacking than the defensive midfielders, is Baek Seung-ho. So he is 25 years old. Again, his first tournament. He's the one who was with the Barcelona Youth Club.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and we have goalkeeper Song Bum-gun. He looks, I think, to be the backup keeper anyway. He's 25 years old, but again, it's his first tournament. And he played for Korea University, which is another of the universities I taught at. Jo Yoo-min, a central defender. He is a likely candidate, 25 years old, but his first tournament. This is kind of illustrating what you said about the players kind of being a bit older before they join the squad.
Yeah, just 3 caps to his name so far.
All right, and Kim Tae-hwan. So Kim Tae-hwan, again, actually 33 years old, so hardly belongs on this list, but has not made a tournament during his career. So this may be the first one. We consider him a likely candidate here. And finally, Jo Gyu-sung, the forward who has been getting starts, and he is 24 years old, so really is a new player to the squad.
Yeah, a couple goals for him though, 4 and 15 caps. So, hopefully can keep that up for the national team.
Yeah, And as we said, 16 or 17 players that that are in the possible category who we won't go through here. But yeah, quite a lot of a lot to choose from anyway. Now we'll take a look at injuries, and maybe you can report on the injury, Connor. We only have two actually, and they're both possible candidates. First one is Gang Thang U.
Yeah, well, this one bit more of a doubt because of his special leave, and we you talked about that earlier. Not sure whether that's military service, one site or one source was to kind of cross competition. So yeah, it's a bit unclear what's kind of tying him up, but he yeah wasn't selected for the last 6 matches.
Yeah, we'll try to update that in the update podcast. The only other concern is Lee Dong Jun. What's wrong with him?
Yeah, it's listed that he has a knee injury. So he remained on the injury list basically up until September. So we're not sure whether he'll be able to recover from that.
Yeah, we'll have to update that in the podcast because we got a bit of mixed reporting from our sources on that. So he may be recovered, or knee injuries tend to be a bit ongoing. So hard to say. But again, only a possible candidate. So even if he didn't make it, he wouldn't be a major loss. Finally, we'll look at notable absences. So we'll begin with Jang Hyun-soo. That's kind of an interesting story, and we told the story during the player by player. I just didn't put a name to it, but he's the player who admitted to falsifying some of the details regarding his military service. So he was banned from the team in 2018 after playing in the 2018 World Cup. So he was a starter in that tournament, a central defender. So, but he was off the team by the time the 2019 Asian Cup came around. Okay, next we have Gi Sung-yong. He's actually been off the team for quite a while, but will be a familiar name to those who follow the Premier League. And actually in the same category, Lee Chung-yong, the left midfielder. We have Ji Dong-won, also been off the team for quite a while. Gu Jia-chul is a bit of a loss, though. He was active up until the 2019 Asian Cup. And sorry, I'm supposed to be putting these names on the list. So there is Gi Sung-yong, Lee Chung-yong, Ji Dong-won, and Gu Jia-chul. And finally, the player who, may still be a potential candidate, but Kim Shin-wook, who was a starter in the 2018 World Cup. So those players absent from the team, but of course they've been replaced by younger players. And now we have the predicted starters. So do you want to start us off there, Connor?
Sure. Well, with the manager, it's been Paulo Bento for a few years, and he'll stay in charge.
Yeah, he'll be. We'll call him a starter. Okay, for goalkeepers, we have definite candidates Kim Sung-gyu and Jo Hyun-woo, and then likely candidate Song Bum-gun, and maybe a possible candidate Kim Dong-jun.
Yeah, well, we mentioned that the first two names seem to be sharing it a little bit, but that Kim Sung-gyu seems to be kind of in pole position. Do you agree?
I agree. I think he'll be the starter. Maybe a bit of rotation there. But Kim Sung-gyu seems to actually have the pole position, as you say. For central defenders, we have three definite. So Kim Min-jae and Kim Young-kwon, and also Kwon Kyung-won, and one likely in Jo Yoon-min. We have a couple of possible candidates, and probably one of them will make the squad because they tend to bring 5 or 6 central defenders. How about this one, Connor?
Yeah, I think Kim Min-jae, who plays for Napoli, and Kim Young-kwon will be the starters. And in actual fact, this position seems a little bit more settled than some.
I agree. When we have definite, that means that we think they're definite to make the final team, but not necessarily be a starter. They missed Kim Young Jae in the 2018 World Cup, so they'll be delighted to have him back. At left back, do you like the definite candidate Hong Chul or the likely candidate Kim Jin Soo? We also have a possible candidate in Gang Thang U.
I'm not sure I'm confident. We mentioned this was one of the positions where they seem to be going back and forth, alternating. Um, so yeah, it's really difficult to say. Do you have one? Do you favor one or the other?
I slightly favor Kim Jin Soo, the likely candidate. He started a little bit more, but I'm actually going to use yellow, suggesting that they're going to rotate that position. I think both of them will start.
Yeah.
I mean, alternatively. For the right back position, we have likely candidate Kim Tae-won and then possible candidates Lee Yong and Kim Moon-hwan.
Yeah, it's another unsettled position, and all three of those have actually started a handful of games, since 2021. So it's actually all three would have a strong case. So yeah, I'm not sure if I favor one, possibly the likely candidate, but what about you?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't even feel like I can highlight a rotating position here. I think it could be any one of them. They've really not settled on this position much. Yeah, I think they'll be there and it'll be one of them, but I can't hazard a guess as to who. So let's move on to defensive midfielders. We have definite candidate Hwang In-bom and likely candidate Jung Woo-young, not to be confused with the secondary striker of the same name. And we also have possible candidate Kim Dong-hyun.
Yeah, well, we mentioned that the first two names you mentioned, they do tend to start in a pair. I do think that a 4-2-3-1 is a likely formation, so I would point to those two, Hwang In-bom and Jung Woo-young, as likely starters.
Yeah, me too. I think even when they do have one kind of defensive midfielder, like a stopper, often the other one's on the field anyway, just playing a bit in advance. So I think that's a pretty consistent pairing there. Okay, for central midfielders, we have definite candidate Baek Jung-ho, and that's really all we have. We have no likely candidates, but just a couple of possibles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I see anyone kind of emerging from that, especially given the ones you mentioned for the defensive midfield position.
Yeah, Baek Jung-ho plays a little bit up the field, a bit more like a central attacking midfielder. He's actually one of the few players who haven't played in a tournament who we consider a definite candidate. That's why his name is in light grey, YouTube watchers. And but I think he will be a starter on the field. They seem to like him.
All right.
Left midfielder, who's this guy? Son Heung-min. He's a definite candidate. And then we have three possible candidates on that side, but no likely.
Yeah, I mean, Son Heung-min, there's really no debate whether he'll play in the left midfield role or somewhere else, but no debate about him starting.
Yeah, exactly. On the right side, we have definite candidates Hang Hee-chan and Kwon Chang-hoon, and no likely candidates there either.
Yeah, I think Hwang Hee-chan, if he's fit, I know he's had some fitness concerns for Wolves, but I would expect him to start.
Me too. Again, not necessarily on the right side, but they'll find room for him. Kwon Chang-hoon, I think, may get a couple of starts in the cup, to be honest, but I'm not bold enough to highlight his name in green here. And we look at forward line, beginning with attacking midfielders. We have Lee Jae-sung as a definite, and we have secondary striker Jung Woo-young, the other Jung Woo-young, among the possible names. Lee Jae-sung, do you have an opinion there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've identified 5 midfielders, but he could certainly see some action, either as a starter or a sub. But yeah, possibly in competition with I forget the name. Was it Beck? Who we?
Oh yeah, Bexon, the central midfielder.
Yeah,
Yeah, Bexon Ho. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Bexon Ho could be in competition with this position, and yet they do seem to find room for him on the field. So yeah, maybe we should put. I don't know. As you say, I think he'll start some games. Maybe I should put him in yellow, but I'm going to leave him in green. Damn it. How about forwards? We have definite candidates Hwang Ui-jo and likely candidate Jo Gyu-sung. And I'll mention the possibles here, Jo Young-uk and Kim Gun-hui, because they'll probably at least come on as substitutes. Forwards are substituted a bit more. Do you have any thoughts
I
there?
think Jo Gyu-sung is pushing for a position. He's had some good involvement in recent games, but I think they'll defer to Hwang Ui-jo, who just has a bit more experience. I think they'll go with him up front.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they may experiment with formations, and Jo Gyu-sung will maybe get in there for a couple of starts. But Hwang Hui-jo seems to be the number one guy. All right, well, those are our predictions. We'll have to see just how wrong we are when we get to the cup, but we may get a sniff of the errors of our ways when we do the update podcast. So that brings us to the end of this podcast, or this media cast, we're calling it.
Yeah, so keep in mind we will be doing an update as new information comes out, and that will probably be available in early November when teams are publishing their squad lists.
Right, so keep an eye on us at Soccerphiles Canada. That is Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And our website, soccerphiles.captivate.fm. We're also on YouTube, and check the show notes, which are improving, for links to our websites and previous podcast series. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me, Connor.
My pleasure. We'll see you next time.
You bet. Bye-bye.